So we moved to Durham, and there we discussed baby names. And there was this one particular name that we both had been interested in for a son. And I had, liked that name even before meeting him. So I thought, well, this must be God if we both like that name. But yeah, and I could just really see forever with him. He was I could really picture him at the end of the aisle, and um, he is the only guy I've ever been able to picture an actual wedding with, and myself walking down the aisle to. I was just able to picture life with him. But I know that will happen again when the Lord brings his man. And I continued to take Plan B pills. Um, I would say I started getting a really bad side effect from the Plan B pills. But Marcus, he wanted me to continue taking them, which I think was an unloving thing for him to request me to do. I just remember being all in, even though I had moved to Durham without him. And I was just ready to I was like, okay with just living on my own. I was like, I'm going to do this. You know, Being with him, I was all in when it came to the relationship. And I recall before we moved to Durham, he asked me if I was okay with the drug use. And I told him that I was, as long as it wasn't affecting me much and as long as it wasn't affecting our kids at all. But there was brokenness in his question and brokenness in my response as well. Um, at this time, I would just never be with the guy who was using. And there in Durham, I just continued to express my love for him. I recall I wrote him a letter. Um, and in the letter, I just expressed my feelings towards him. And he's the only guy I ever written a letter to. So we moved from there and we moved to Cary. And Cary was a lovely place. The apartment was great. The area was great. And I recall that he and I were arguing one day while he was dropping me off at work. And I already, didn't like the job. Initially, I did, but then I became very uninterested in the product. And I just hated going there. It just really stressed me out to the point where my back would hurt. And because we were arguing on my way to work, I just didn't have it in me to go in at all on that day. And because I had so much anxiety and the arguments with Marcus were adding to that anxiety, I just felt overwhelmed and I just couldn't continue working the job. So I stopped going. I recall Trey called my phone and left a voicemail at 1 a.m. one morning. And when I saw the call come through, I was like, this cannot be good. And, Marcus was still awake. And so, Marcus called Trey, and then Marcus came into my room because we had separate bedrooms. So Marcus entered my room very excited. He just handed me the phone for Trey to speak to me and to ask me if he could move in. And I was thinking to myself, well, there's space in the home, so this must be God. So Trey moved in. The whole process of going to get Trey, it was just uncomfortable for me. The drive there, and even when he was putting his things in my car, his TV broke. I guess these were just signs that he was not supposed to live with us. And meanwhile, I'm just hating the sexual sin. I I am just struggling to not sleep with Marcus, and I visited Georgia a couple of times because I was like, maybe I can just detox myself, from the sexual attraction to him, from the sexual behavior. But no, that did not help. I would just return back to that home, where the object of my affection was, and the sin continued. While I was in Georgia during one of these trips, I saw that Marcus had posted a picture on social media of himself holding a gun. And I freaked out because I knew that he would act crazy sometimes. I called him up and I asked him if he had a gun. He lied and said no. Um, and then I was like, you're lying. You and Trey need to both leave. And then Trey texted saying he didn't have anything to do with Marcus having a gun and asked if he could stay. And I told him that he could. When I had first met Marcus in Fayetteville, the smell of his cigars did not bother me, but soon after meeting him, they began bothering me. Um, but since we had moved to the Triangle, with him knowing that, hey, the smell of smoke and everything just really bothers me. He'd smoke outside. He would never smoke in the home. But again, sometimes the house, with Trey living there, it would smell funny. And I asked him if he and Trey had been smoking in the house, smoking anything, and he'd lie and say no. I recall even asking him if Trey was a bad influence on him, and he stated that anything he was doing was his choice. But meanwhile, Marcus and I began coughing really badly due to the smell in the home. Marcus is the type of person to talk about people and to tell people's business behind their back. He told me why Trey, needed a place to stay. Um, he said that Trey had beat up his girlfriend while they were doing cocaine, then ran out the house naked. Marcus would, in front of Trey, Marcus would act like he had no problem with Trey's behavior. Um, but he would tell me things like, you know, don't let Trey drive the car, stuff like that. We don't really know him like that. But he never expressed to Trey that, he felt this way. So Marcus and Trey would like to go to the clubs and stuff. And, I recall one day Marcus came up to me and he said that he felt that he and Trey were taking advantage of me. And he said that he just wanted me to do whatever was best for myself, even if it meant telling them no. They would like going to the club and stuff. And, he would expect me to be available to just give them rides. I don't recall everything that was happening during that time that made him feel like he and Trey were taking advantage of me. But I do recall later on telling him that I felt taken advantage of, and he said that I made it easy for people to take advantage of me. Whenever Marcus and I would argue and he would start, threatening me, I would call up his mom because I knew that if his mom was on the line, Marcus would just completely just stop in his tracks, whatever he was doing. It's like the little boy in him would rise up and he would just completely freeze. Um, but there was one day when I didn't call his mom. Instead, I called his brother. I'm sorry. Instead, I called my brother. I just recall he and I were arguing one day, and his pupils were just really dilated. His eyes were just bulging, and I didn't know what he had taken. I guess I just thought he had drunk alcohol. I didn't know that he had taken any drug at all because, I just always found him to be very functional. I always felt like his behavior when he was sober was never really much different from his behavior when he was under the influence of something. But now that I think back over the relationship, he was rarely sober with me. Well, on this particular day, I don't recall exactly what we were arguing about, but I do remember him saying that he was threatening to sock me in the face. Those were his words. And I told him that he and Trey needed to leave, put him on, Marcus and I were just driving. Marcus called up Trey, and Trey was just, saying things about me, asking, what's wrong with her. And then, when he found out that he was on speaker and I could hear him, his tone changed a little bit. But I had already been hearing what he had been saying about me. And I just told him that he needed to leave. And Marcus continued threatening me. So I just called my brother and got him on the line. And while my brother Lanil was on the line, his wife called the cops. And I just drove to a gas station until the cops arrived. I told them that Marcus had been threatening me and I asked them to escort him home. My plan was to just get some of my things and move to Georgia. The cops stated that they were Raleigh cops. You know, they worked in Raleigh, so they didn't have any jurisdiction in Cary where we lived, but that I could just leave him there. You know, because Marcus usually had so much control over himself, no matter what he was under the influence of, he was speaking very calmly, you know, around the cops. And I just got back into my car and Marcus asked how he was supposed to get home. I was like, find a way. And he said, I don't have a key, you know, because he had lost it one day when he was at the club. So when he said, I don't have a key, I just told him you shouldn't have lost it. And I closed my driver's side door. Then he just rushed to the door, you know, opened it, and he yelled out, you think I'm afraid of the police? Ashley, I'm not afraid of the police. And then he got arrested. And then the county, I guess it was the county, they filed charges against him. So I went to Georgia for a few days, but I missed my place in Cary, and I missed Marcus. And, you know, I had saw his mugshot online, and seeing that, you know, saddened me. And after I saw that, you know, he was still in jail, but I sent him a lot of texts. But he saw the text after he got out of jail. I texted him that I was sorry that he got arrested, that was never my goal for him, and that my aim was only to get away from him because he was scaring me. So I sent him multiple text messages. And then a detective called me. He said that Marcus had apologized for his behavior towards the cops because he was cussing them out and stuff. He confessed to the cops that he was high on meth when he was arrested. And I didn't know what to say to that. I was flabbergasted. Then the detective told me to file a restraining order. And I was like, okay. But I was still thinking about how crazy it was that he had done meth and was high on it. When Marcus got out of jail, he texted me, you know. He saw my text and he wanted to act like I was wrong for having him arrested. He knew I had felt guilty about him being arrested. He was trying to take advantage of that. And then I just texted back, you were high on meth? And he began apologizing. And, you know, as I talk about this, I'm reminded of when I first began seeing him. He said he would take 12 ecstasy pills at a time, stating that he had built up a tolerance for it. I had never seen him take 12 at a time, so he was probably exaggerating when he said that. But, you know, again, he did function well when high, and I couldn't ever really tell when he was. And apparently the cops didn't know that he was high either until he had confessed it. He and I would video chat, and then I decided to return home to Cary. I told myself and others that I wasn't going to date him again. And his mother encouraged me not to see him. She said that him being arrested was his own fault. I filed the restraining order. I didn't want to. I just did it because, you know, it was something I had been told to do. Soon after that, though, you know, I was speaking with his mom again, and I told her that I missed him and was worried about him. And she encouraged me to get him from the hotel he was at and to cancel the restraining order. So I did. You know, he was back and the restraining order had been canceled. I go through his phone. I guess that was kind of I don't know, an insecure habit, a habit that I picked up due to that guy I married doing his dirt. You know, and I saw that he was texting Trey and he was like, you know, he's sorry that I asked him to leave, but that they were just going too hard with the drugs. But when speaking to me, you know, he'd be singing a different tune, you know, acting like I was wrong for putting Trey out.